It was the mid-90s, a quiet Friday afternoon at the morgue. I'd seen my fair share of lifeless bodies come through those cold, sterile doors. But this day, in particular, would haunt my dreams for years to come. My job as a medical examiner had its eerie moments, but nothing could have prepared me for what happened that fateful afternoon. My assistant and I had only one autopsy scheduled for the day. The body of a woman who had tragically met her end in a domestic accident. The day seemed routine, and I looked forward to finishing up early and getting some much-needed rest over the weekend. As I stood there in the examination room, my assistant brought in all the instruments required for the procedure. Every step of our work was methodical, and we meticulously recorded every observation on a voice recorder. This was our protocol, our way of ensuring thorough documentation of our examinations. I started the initial cutting, and my assistant stood by, poised to jot down any pertinent details. The room's air was still, the only sound being the surgical instruments doing their grim work. That's when the first hint of strangeness began to seep into the room. A faint whisper, barely perceptible, slipped through in the background of my voice recorder. I paused and looked at my assistant, a hint of confusion in my eyes. She suggested it might be interference from the equipment, so we decided to ignore it and continue the necropsy. But the unease in the room was undeniable. The minutes passed and the whispers began to become clearer. It was as if someone, or something, was trying to communicate with us. The words, however, were so muffled that at first they seemed meaningless. I approached the recorder, and that's when everything happened. A shiver ran down my spine as I heard it. A voice, a female voice, barely louder than a breath, whispered, "Help me here." I felt like I had been given an electric shock and my hands started to shake. I looked at my assistant, whose face was pale and her eyes were wide with fear. She had heard that too. We froze, silence hanging heavy in the room. We couldn't make sense of it. The woman I was examining was dead. There was no way she could be talking. The chilling words, "Help me here," won't leave my head, trying to ignore what we had heard. We finished the autopsy as quickly as possible. We put the body in the drawer and left the room. But the moment we closed the door behind us, the unexpected happened again. We heard a loud scream, even clearer, "Help me here." This time it wasn't simple interference with the recorder. We heard it loud and clear. My assistant and I quickly went upstairs and sat at the table petrified. We were silent for a few minutes until my assistant started crying in fear. I tried to calm her down, but the situation was difficult. I was perplexed myself. After a few minutes, we decided to discuss what happened. We came to the conclusion that people would think we were crazy, and my assistant said she wanted to forget all that. So we decided not to reveal what happened to anyone. But there was still the voice recorder. We retrieved the recording and listened to the autopsy audio. To our horror, there it was, clear as day. The cry for help. A woman's voice crying, "Help me here." In a state of panic, I deleted the recording, and throughout my professional career, I never said a word to anyone. Today, as a retired doctor after so many years, I am able to share this story that for many years raised questions in my mind about the boundary between life and death. For me, there was never an answer, but I'm sure there is a lot after death.
I'm a doctor, and I was in the autopsy room, doing my thing, preparing the body of a 9-year-old child who died after being run over in front of the school where he studied. I'm there sewing the boy's chest when I hear a soft voice, a light whisper. I turn around, but there's no one there, just the boy lying motionless on the table. I imagine it's probably just my tired brain playing tricks on me. Then I clearly hear the voice say, "I'm going out to play." I look around again. Nothing, just the boy lying on the stretcher. I started to think it was some kind of prank or something. I try to ignore it and focus on what I'm doing. But then things get really weird. I feel a vibration behind me and turn to look. Boom, there he is, a child just 2 feet away, just standing there looking at me with those empty eyes. My heart is pounding and I'm frozen. I'm like, nah, this can't be happening. Maybe I'm just tired or stressed. But this boy doesn't disappear. He starts running towards me and I can hear her footsteps echoing. I'm freaking out because dead kids shouldn't run. I'm in shock, unable to move. He approaches and whispers, "Hi, wanna play?" It gives me goosebumps, big time. I can't cope, so I run out of the room, heading to the office as if my life depended on it, my heart racing. I arrive at the office. I look like the ghost, out of breath and scared. I know what I saw shouldn't be possible. Dead children don't do that kind of feat. It is something supernatural beyond logic. I sit up, trying to catch my breath. I'm not alone in this. Something crazy is happening at the hospital, and it's almost 4 in the morning. I don't want to be alone with whatever supernatural thing is going on. I'm not usually one to believe in these scary things, but that night, yes, something messy was happening and I wanted no part of it. I didn't want to delve into what was happening. I just knew I needed to get out of there. That night was completely terrifying, something I will never forget.
It was a typical sweltering night of the western part of the country. I'd been working as a medical examiner for what felt like an eternity, so you could say I had become desensitized to the gruesome sights that passed through my autopsy room. But little did I know that one fateful night would shatter my indifference and leave me questioning the boundaries of the natural world. The call came in after a horrific multi-car pileup on the nearby highway. 4 casualties, all destined for my examination table. I didn't think much of it. It was just another routine night of work. I went about my usual preparations, laying out my tools with the clinical precision that comes from years of experience. After I finished the necropsy on the first body, which had been easy and quick, I went on to examine the second body. That's when a sudden and inexplicable breeze blew through the room, making my hair shake. I turned around looking for a window or an open door, but there was nothing. The room was closed and the air conditioning was on, but on the wall on the other side, very far away. My heart raced, but I calmed down, thinking that it had been a figment of my tired mind. Minutes later, the mysterious breeze returned, but this time stronger. This time, even my coat shook and I got goosebumps. I looked around in fear and it seemed like the breeze was coming from the corner of the room. I looked and there was no source of wind in the corner. I was scared but decided to investigate if there were any gaps. Gathering my courage, I took cautious steps towards the corner of the room, moving slowly. With each step, it felt like the temperature in the room dropped. I tried to button my coat, but I got confused and left it open. When I reached the corner of the room, it was like coming face to face with someone invisible. I looked to see if there were any cracks, but I didn't find anything. That's when suddenly something terrifying happened. A strong gust of wind hit me right in the face. It was as if someone standing in front of me was blowing me very close up. I turned to try to run, but my legs lost strength and I fell to the ground in despair. I only had the strength to scream. I looked at the closed door and saw a figure of a person standing there looking at me. I could only see the silhouette. I couldn't see details of the face. After a lot of screaming, an assistant doctor opened the door and found me on the floor in the corner of the room. He immediately picked me up and took me out of there. We went to the rest area, where I told him everything that had happened. I asked him to go into the room and investigate, hoping there would be some logical explanation for what happened, but he found nothing wrong. The room was calm and there was no sign of any unusual phenomenon. I stopped for a while to compose myself, had a large coffee, and tried to regain strength to go back to work. But I was still scared by everything. All I can think about was the figure of a person standing and looking at me. I told my supervisor I was going home and asked someone to replace me that day. I spent a lot of time thinking about what happened, but I managed to go back to work a few days later. I have never witnessed anything like this again, but today I am sure that there are many mysteries beyond material life as we know it.